Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. Support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys. Head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
The saga continues.
of
Irish music.
Irish indie music scene.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched Good Vibrations. Positive Quakes.
Mm-hmm. The Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch big hit of the 90s. Make my own music video, did a whole game about it.
You what?
Once upon a time in the city of Belfast, there lived a boy named Terry.
Do you want to come back to my mum and dad's?
No. Do you want to go back to my mum and dad's?
No. I want to open a record shop.
We had every kind of beautiful record on our shelves.
I'll put that record out. You're pissed. So what? You're making a record.
Good Vibrations. It was a Mark Wahlberg song.
Oh, no, I know that.
Make My Music video. Do you remember those? It was like a Sega CD, Make My Video. It was like a series of kind of sort of games that they put out on a couple of CD-ROM consoles where you basically, it was like a low-level like Windows media like editor, basically, like a movie editor, where you could just like assemble clips and effects and stuff to make your own version of the music video for Good Vibrations or whatever disc you got. They made a few of them. Anyway, this is nothing to do with the film Good Vibrations. Nothing to do at all.
No, this is a different film. When is this made? 2012,
I believe.
2012. Big old thank you for Mickey for Therapy 2023. Mickey for Therapy 2023.
Thank you.
Time is running out, Mickey for Therapy. This is our last we just watched of the year, I believe.
Oh, man. Better get in there. Get in there under the wire.
Yeah, but thank you so much. Yeah, Mickey has done... They made us watch Once, which I quite enjoy.
Yeah.
The
2013,
Commitments,
2013 was his film.
Oh, okay. We were close. The Commitments, which was fine. And is this our third? I think it is.
I think this is the third, yeah, if we're not counting... Because it wasn't Irish, but it was like the a hardcore logo was like the Canadian
that wasn't Mickey,
hardcore
that
scene.
Yeah, that wasn't Mickey's doing that.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Yeah. But yeah, and that was Canadian, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I had said.
Yeah. This is available on Freevee, which is irritating, but
yeah,
it's free.
Kind of like the only place it was available to watch.
It was.
At least in the States, at least for us.
I knew nothing about this film, and in fact,
I had never heard of this movie before.
Yeah, I went into it not knowing anything but the title, and I was like, I hate the title. And I think it's now because of Marky Mark. Now that you pointed that out, maybe subconsciously, this movie is actually about Terry Hooley, a person I did not know existed.
Me either. Never heard of Terry Hooley.
Never heard of Terry Hooley. That I wanted to say that because I am a big fan of the Undertones. I listen to them. I listen to them like every time I get in the car. And so that's why this movie just snuck up and sucker punched me, because again, I didn't know anything about this movie. Terry Hooley is from Belfast, and he is a real person, and he is the founder of Good Vibrations, which is a record shop. And then eventually a record label. And he was responsible for the band The Undertones, which is a 70s punk band that I listened to, as well as Rudy, which was another band that I had known songs from, and The Outcast, which is another band I knew. But The Undertones they were kind of a one-hit wonder. But they were for the general public, with Teenage Kicks. But they have I think they only have one album, I want to say. I don't know. but they're a very good punk band, and I think a good amount of people probably remember them. 70s punk, which is, of course, like very different than you imagine it. Like this song, they do a bit about that, where that song, they're like, this isn't a punk band.
Yeah.
So this movie
they're like, what's he's not singing about? He's singing about like teenage stuff.
Yeah. Which is a lot,
Where's
again,
the
rage? A lot of 70s punk was like this. But yeah, this is basically like just a kind of biography about this guy having this sort of moment of greatness. What did you think of this movie?
I mostly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was, I'm super into punk music too. I'm not as into the 70s, although I mean they do mention like some bands that I'm, from like,
they mentioned Buzzcocks as well. Stiff Little Fingers.
Stiff Little Fingers
is in the soundtrack.
Band that I know. I didn't know Undertones or what's the big one? Rudy. I didn't know. That's like the kind of the main band that he's sort of like friends with in the movie. When I was reading up about them, apparently they just sort of like, mainstream success just evaded them. They never really got huge outside of Northern Ireland.
So it's a lot of punk,
But that's how many bands have I seen that of course that's just this how it goes. Anyway, I think I sort of like you. This movie sort of was able to sucker punch me because it just has such like I have such nostalgia for getting into punk and being in the punk scene and playing shows like this. So this like I was picking up the good vibrations of that, I guess, if you will. But also this movie really excuses its main character.
Oh, I want to talk about
like
that.
This movie worships Terry Hooley to the point where they cast the major people in his life as characters that he does the most egregious harm to. It's his business partner and his wife.
And they all forgive him.
And they just walk up to him at the end of the movie after he fucks them both over royally to do this show that puts them into financial ruin. They come up to him at the end and they just like could totally forgive him and let him off the hook. It's like it's like writing your own fantasy where everybody apologizes to you and says how awesome you were and how right you were. It's such a weird
there were
element.
Things they could have done. There were things they could have done. That's my biggest critique of this movie, and it's a huge critique.
It's a huge critique, because it doesn't
the main
feel
character.
It doesn't feel honest in that way. It's like it's a very quirky film. Like there are two directors. It's not quite mixed media, but there's a frenetic pace to it, and there's a lot of like surprising cutaways and non sequiturs that use real footage, like real documentary footage, or it'll cut away to something that's like breaking the format of the film. So it has this playful tone. So you already know you're in a heightened reality, but like because it keeps showing you that these are real people and these are real events, you're sort of taking the movie on its word, sort of like on good faith that it's like, okay, this is probably a pretty honest telling of at least some of these events, but the fact that it's willing to bring up the challenge, but not actually challenge its main character.
Yeah, so like there were two ways they could have went about it, and I know the one I wanted. They could have either established at least his wife.
Right, she's nothing. I don't even know what her fucking name is.
Yeah, because
apparently
there's a version.
It's Ruth.
Yeah, there's a version where his wife, where you would understand why she would end on the way she ends, like forgiving him. If they established that she believed in this stuff just as much as him,
but they don't do
she's
that.
Not. Yes, they
she's
don't.
She's not
do
a character.
That. The other version is if you show the opposite, like extreme consequences, and that's the thing is the movie seems weirdly aware of it, but then like we're saying, like it keeps like jumping between that awareness because there's ultimately like it's the fact that there's a part where his kid gets born and they show the birth intercut with him at a Susie and the Banshees after party.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I would also go to that after party. I get it, but that's why I don't have kids. They showing it to point out, look how he missed it. You know, he's off partying while his kid is getting born. But then the next scene is just his wife just happy to see him.
Right,
and kind of forgives him.
So very little consequence. Like, well, the rest of his like hooligan friends come in and the nurse keeps chasing them out, and then she tells him, "Look, I can't believe you brought these guys. Like you're." He's like, "Well, they're like."
Oh yeah, she does. She does break it off.
This is where the
she?
actual challenge happens. But this is as much as the movie will do is it will just address it. Like it will just point at it. It won't actually make him face
There's
it.
There's no consequences.
Right. He doesn't actually have to do anything to work through it. She just forgives him at the end. Like this, there's no reflection. There's no moment of growth here. Like she says, he was like, well, they're like family. And then she says, they're not your family though. We are. Like me and this baby are your family. And you do not care about us. Like, so she asks for a separation. And then that's like the moment where she challenges him. And then there's a moment later where his business partner is like, you're ruining us. This concert was supposed to get your record shop out of debt because you put your house, like the house that you and your wife and child live in, up as collateral without telling her that you did this. But he flushes it all down the toilet because he lets everyone in on his guest list. And so like it's trying to portray him as this heroic figure because he's somebody who wanted to bring music to the people, and he gives it all away to his own self-destruction in a lot of ways. Like he gives away the Undertones song basically for 500 quid for a new Vans. Yes. For a new van, basically. And it turns out to be like a
because
huge
he's like,
right.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't write it. You know,
right,
like,
it doesn't,
and I love
it's
that.
like it doesn't belong to me. But also he's like, he's like, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people. And it's like, no, it belongs to the guys who wrote it, and you're making this decision without them. Like, it doesn't examine that. And like it also doesn't examine the part where it's like it wants to portray him as a heroic figure for doing all this and for bringing people together and for which is it is. I'm not saying it doesn't have value, but it's like it's not willing to. It's presenting the idea that he is doing it at the expense of his personal life, but it doesn't actually explore that. Like it makes it clear that that's what's happening, but it won't actually go into it.
That's what it is. The movie, I don't think it's lost on the movie.
No, it doesn't.
I absolutely
seem to
don't
be,
think
because it's there.
But like,
it just doesn't go into it.
Right. There's this thread throughout about kind of faith. They like his childhood. They show him like singing like choir songs, and there's this idea of like he's a very happy dumb guy who wants to put his faith in something, and he finds something to put his faith in. And it's blind, dumb faith is sort of the idea. It's almost nihilistic faith, where but like, and what the movie very rightfully points out, and very efficiently too. Like they have the scene where he, like you said, he wants to get the record recorded, and he puts his house down as collateral without consulting his wife. It's pretty early on they do that, and you flag it because it's a big moment, and you're like, I know exactly what kind of guy this is.
Yeah.
He is reckless and cheery, and like he's always kind of cheery throughout it.
He's almost always smiling. Yeah.
He's kind of apolitical. They have a good
I wanted to talk about that. He tries to be, because he opens a record store, and this initial idea is to be completely neutral. He wants to be the centrist. He's like, I don't want to take any sides. People just come in here and enjoy music.
They do a good line. They say some people call it a revolution, some people call it the Troubles, an equally useless word. And you know, like immediately, you're like, okay, I know what this guy is.
Yeah,
it's a very efficient line.
Yeah. So he sort of finds out that he has to sort of take a side. He has to believe in something. Like at the punk show, they go like, fuck the police. And he's like, yeah, fuck the police. And he joins the kids. Like he finds something to believe in through punk music. Whereas before he was trying to get by without doing that. Like he's like, I just want to open my record store and just sell whatever, you know? So anyway, that's all.
Yeah, no. So this is one of the positives of the movie. It does. So the introduction, the idea is, and it's a very familiar idea to anybody who's into punk, which is this is kind of about, in a way, it's about the conception of punk, because they start by establishing that like, so this is, they did call it the Troubles, by the way, which is the most fucking European, like Ireland. Yeah,
I thought that was well known.
I didn't know that. I was like, fuck,
sorry.
Really? They called it the Troubles?
Oh yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so this is like right around like, you know, the revolution going on there, which, lasted a bit of time.
70s to the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
Late 60s to the 90s.
Late 60s, because he talks about how all the peace and love bands from the 60s kind of abandoned the Belfast. He talks about how they were all there, and then they weren't.
Yeah, it's interesting about
And
I'm sorry.
Well, it's about this idea of he starts in this nihilist place where he's like, fuck all of this, and he just wants to bring music to the people, and then he has this struggle where he's like, well, what is the music for the people, right? And basically a kid comes in and says, do you have the Buzzcocks Orgasm Addict? And he's like, fucking what? And he's like, you're in a record store, order it. And the kid is playing a show, and so he literally puts up the show flyer over the Rolling Stones flyer, and he's like, sorry, boys. Which pretty much sums it up, which is like this idea that like, what is the music for the people during this time? It's a new
generation, yeah.
It's punk. Yeah, and punk didn't abandon them. Punk is the thing that's being born here.
And it's funny, like that scene we were talking about where like, where's the rage and stuff, and what you were saying, like a lot of punk music in the 70s is like this, where it's about like teenage stuff and goofy, like everyday life stuff, where it's interesting that it was just like, it's at least in the Belfast scene with these bands that it's focusing on, it really does seem kids who are just mad as hell that they're in this situation, and they just want to have a normal life, because that's what the songs are about.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
It's funny how that is, but it's like punk has always been like, political punk kind of came later. Punk has always kind of creeped into politics, I think, for this reason, where like they're always the disposable people in society, or that's how they considered themselves, right? So like naturally you start getting political. It's the people who are frustrated finding the scene, and that's what they're showing here, is like he's a frustrated guy, he finds this scene, that moment where they go, we hate the cops, the band does to the cops, and he realizes like,
cops, and then they start playing the fucking fuck the cops song.
Yeah. And so that's, he basically finds this underground punk area, and they're all lost. They don't have anyone. And he's like, well, shit, like, this is my people. Look at all because they also inject, in a fun way, like the concept of capitalism, which is like, there's a few ports where like he goes to that bar and he's like, can this be the punk club? And they're like, I don't know. And he's like, look at how many fucking people you can get. It's sort of like, it's that realization of like, this is also a lot of wallets. Like, this is a lot of people who are willing to pay to have somewhere to be. But they won't pay that much, as we learn.
Right, yeah. It becomes like, that's what he says to sell Dylan Moran.
Right, he's using that, yeah.
The freaking guy from Shaun of the Dead using his pub.
Shaun of the Dead, and there's a Doctor Who in this.
There is a Doctor Who, Jodie Whittaker, yeah. Because he does keep getting shit. Like, he gets a little bit of shit from his dad and from some of his friends, because we learn, like, his dad is a socialist, and he was sort of raised in a socialist household. So, like, he's getting shits like, where you're opening a record store and you're doing all, it's a big reason why he gives everything away, basically.
Yeah, the part where he's like, Dad, this capitalist crap, like, and he's outside heckling his own son's store. By the way, speaking of Shaun of the Dead, you recognize the dad? That's the cop from Hot Fuzz that they can't understand a word he's saying.
I did, but I couldn't quite place him. That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a very good statement on like how punk starts, and like this guy, this like happy guy finding punk. I've met people like that, where they come from these like they don't initially love punk. They just, it's like, oh, they feel the same thing I feel.
I mean, I think a lot of people who get into a scene have a similar experience, right? Where you find your way in through whatever gateway, like somebody shows you it's a band you like or whatever. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a music scene. It's whatever scene that you discovered that meant something to you, and you walk in however you got there because something piqued your interest, and then you sit there listening, and we get to watch him experience this as he listens to Rudy play their one of their songs. And we get to see him realize, like, oh, fuck, these are my people. Like, these are my people.
In real time, it clicks.
Yeah, it clicks.
And then he's suddenly like, and they reprise the I Saw the Line scene.
I Saw the Light, yeah.
Saw the Light, sorry, but with punk. And so, like, it's sort of this idea of, like, this guy who, this is like in the first 20 minutes. He just wants life to be normal again. The record store, the very centrist feeling. And then he can't find his like anybody into music
because
like
he realizes you can't inspire anybody that way,
right? And so this is like the aha of him finding this moment, and then him becoming basically obsessed with it. Also, there's a fucking what's his name from Game of Thrones.
Oh
record store guy.
Yeah, Sir Davos. This guy, the main guy, is in Game of Thrones too. Yeah,
they're so fucking.
He played a real small part. I think he was one of the Kingsguard, but yeah, the fucking Davos is the engineer, the surly engineer, recording these punk musicians.
Yeah, it's perfect. And so I think that's part of this movie. Like you were talking about the mixed media, it presents itself a little bit as almost a documentary. There's a lot of third person. The part I remember was he's talking about the different people, and he's like, these guys, they ended up in Thin Lizzy. These guys ended up in Wings. These guys, and then they just cut to car bomb shots.
Yeah, because they got murdered.
Yeah, which is brutal.
Yeah.
But it is like it feels like it's sort of mixed like I don't know. It's definitely like a rose-colored glasses look at this guy. At least I assume.
Oh, it's worshipful of him. Worshipful
right,
of him.
because it's sort of about this idea of like the first show they play, they showed the appearance fee, damages, earnings, -20.
Yeah.
And so they immediately show like this isn't making any money.
There's no money in this. Yeah.
That first show is like, oh, I've been to this show.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's like a fucking looks like a church basement. No one's there. There's like 5 people in the front.
Yeah, it looks like a fight club.
Yeah, it does. And so like it's more, I guess it's trying to be more abstract, I guess. It's trying to talk about the movement by using this guy who really believed in it, to the point that he clearly ruined himself financially. And they know that. Again, they know.
Right, the movie.
It's just weird that the movie doesn't follow through.
Yeah, I wish they would ask the question a little harder, because obviously it's presenting, well, maybe not obviously, but I feel like the movie's presenting, look, it took a guy, because he has a big speech where he doesn't really justify what he did. He does to an extent, but he's explaining why he put their house up for collateral, and he says, like, I just do things. I don't think about them, I just do them. And it's honestly kind of worked out okay for me. So the movie seems to be making the argument that it takes somebody like this, it takes people like this who have to take big risks, and it doesn't always pay, and the big risks are, we have to see the consequences of that to understand that, like, even seemingly like small things, like we tend to diminish the value of like music and stuff like this, even though art and expression is incredibly important for any number of reasons we've all talked about on various episodes. But like I think the idea there is shoot, I lost my train of thought.
I have some thoughts.
Cool.
Oh yeah, one other thing though that I thought, a scene that I just flagged as interesting, is the part where they get stopped by like the army, and he says, "You don't want to know what I think of political parties," and the army guy says, "You don't want to know what I think of them either," and they let him go. So they like establish like cops suck, but these guys don't, which was interesting. Like it's very much about political division and like how these kids are just fucking sick of it. It feels like it just made me think like we need another punk movement here in America. Like we really need an explosion of punk right about now.
Well, yeah, it's all the humanity, like humanity pushing through the conflict, and
yeah, it's like this that those bits were weirdly relevant to now as opposed to when this movie came out, which is kind of like, in this like moment of division, like the youth getting fucked over and starting their own movement that's just like, fuck all of this,
Yeah.
But what I wanted to talk about, so going back to him, like, I think this is where the movie bothered me. So I think the movie was trying to do a specific arc, because it's a movie. Movies like to make arcs and stuff.
Yeah, it's
trying
to tell a story after all.
I think they needed to like, I don't know what it was. Maybe it's because they didn't want to change it too much, but what happens doesn't fit the arc. And what I mean by that is, so they do this sort of rise where there's this part where he's being called the godfather of Belfast punk, I believe. And he gets to be put in this magazine. And he has the dark third act moment, which is like he misses his his
This is his kid's birth, yeah.
And he sells the Undertones song for 500 quid. So you know he's not doing it for the money. And this is the problem: is he's doing it for the greatness. That's the idea, right?
Yeah.
And so what
his
happens?
Partner lays that out for him. He is accused of this by his partner.
Yes, he's doing it for ego, and it's represented by this magazine cover, this one magazine cover. Because when his darkest moment, he gets beat up by a couple skinheads
Nazis,
in his own, Nazi skinheads in his record store, and they frame it so that they're kicking the crap out of him, and that magazine cover is right in between.
Right, it's all
taunting him.
Right, everybody who he said nobody has his back in this scene.
Right, and the line is, "You take on too much because you love the glory." Like they show a few, like he misses the birth, and then they cut to 1980, which is like a few years later, and they show that like he's just alone in a bar, and he calls her while drunk, but he can't like pay for the call. The call seems to be like,
it asks for more money.
Yeah, so you get this feeling of like this guy had this one shot with because the other reason when he sells the Undertones song and he's like, you know what, Rudy's going to be twice as good, you know, and then it's clear like he doesn't have the same success.
Well, he screws it up. He gets them on TV,
yes.
But he fucks up because he's enjoying partying and stuff so much that he neglects to actually get the record singles pressed and produced in times to go on sale for when the band's on TV. So they go on TV and then they have no single to sell the following day. So
he's not a good manager.
It was a waste.
Yeah. And he sort of missed this big shot, and we know the house is on the line, and so you don't think of it even like it doesn't have to be about the money. It's about the fact that it's someone else's life.
He's mortgaging basically his wife and his child's future without even consulting them on it.
Right.
And he's doing it in pursuit of a thing bigger than himself, but he's also doing it in pursuit of his own self-aggrandizement, like his own glory.
Exactly. So they have this moment where he says, like, no more of that. And what it means is after the Nazi is like his low point, basically it's an act of faith. He books this giant venue, and he's like, they will show up. They will show up. He pulls down the magazine cover. So that shows that he's like, no more of my ego. It's no longer about me, right? Mm-hmm. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. And he makes this big act of faith. So I guess this is what's hard to reconcile. If this was Empire Records, which has a similar kind of vibe, right? Is like, we got to save the record store. The Hollywood ending is to have your cake and eat it too, right? Is like he throws this big thing, and I do like the idea that in the final moment, like we're doing a fundraiser, and then he just lets everybody in for free, because they do the like they will come moment where it's like everybody showed up to help, and he lets all these fucking piece of shit punks in for free. The Hollywood thing they would do then is they all like donate, right? And they're like, they saved us, But they're right. Punks wouldn't do that shit. They'll steal the donation jar.
Yeah.
Little dirtbags.
Yeah.
And so they do the grounded thing, which
also, you're playing for people who don't have any money.
Yeah, exactly. And so they do the grounded thing, the thing that was kind of in the Commitments and Once, which is like, it's about this moment in time. It's about the music.
About one moment,
it's about bringing people together. And
doing
so they do
one
that.
great thing that exists forever in time. Yeah.
Right. But they have set up this very Hollywood expectation, which is like it's going to save him somehow, and it doesn't.
Nope.
And if it was just one guy, if his family wasn't involved, I think it would be an easier pill to swallow, as like, oh, he's ruined, but he did this one amazing thing, and he was his own reckoning. He did it all himself. But the fact that he has a wife and kid the whole time, and they're like, please, we need money. You sold the house. And then at the end, they're like, it's all right. That's the part that's like really hard pill to swallow.
It's tough, yeah.
And it's hard because what do you do with that? Do you have her go, we're ruined, and leave crying? Because that sucks. So you either have to do the work to make you feel like she also is like, fuck him. Like you need need her to have that energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you need to give her money, even if that's not what really happened. You need to have the magic ending, right? Where everything's okay.
If you want to, if you want to just not to let the character off the hook like this.
Yes, which I would argue in this situation, I would accept either of those. One of them obviously is a little cheap, but it's like you're telling a story. Like it felt like it was all leading to this thing where in the first act he puts the house on collateral. Like, I don't know, there just needed to be some kind of, like, it almost felt too real while not making him out to be the villain.
Right. It wasn't. Yeah. It was realistic, but it didn't actually put any of the consequence onto him. So it was like, well, then why was it realistic?
Right. Yeah. Why was this such a magical film about the power of music?
Yeah.
And then it's like, and he ruined his family at the end, but that's fine. It's fine. We're going to sing Sonny Bono, which I was also like, that's weird.
That's a weird pick.
But
that's a weird
I
pick.
get it because they're young, like they're young punks in the 70s. Like that's, like,
it was weird that
kicks.
it wasn't I Saw the Light, because Hank Williams shows up to him again at the end in another vision,
Right.
because it's another moment where he's seeing the light.
I interpreted it as like, Sonny Bono is more like 60s hippie shit. And it's sort of about passing on the torch in a weird way.
That's
because
true.
he's of two generations,
Yeah,
right? His character.
he's in between two generations, yeah.
Yeah, he's not really a punk. Like, he's just a...
Yeah, he wasn't into it in the music at the beginning of the film.
Right.
Also, I mean, this is a real show, that's probably what they actually played. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I assume. But that's also part of, like, Teenage Kicks, that song feels like a throwback to the 50s, the way the Misfits kind of is, too. And
Yeah.
it's like, you forget, like, that's their 80s. So it's like, yeah, of course they're doing that shit. Because that was their 80s, the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first lines in that song is, well, not that. What is it? That I think it was "Born in '59." Like, it's like
one of the songs. Yeah,
one of the songs. The first lyric is talking about they're born in the '50s.
Right, you forget that.
Yeah,
they haven't mentioned that. At one point, they say like, "What's like a Catholics and Protestants doing in the same band?" And it's just like funny to me that the punk band had that distinction to begin with. But they do the thing where they're always at their mom's house, which I noticed that's a thread with all the movies we've watched from this, the Irish music, is that they all live with their parents, and it's different eras. And I'm not saying that's not a problem now too, but that just pinged me as like a common thread.
Oh, I just think it's common, especially in older generations in Europe. I mean, I seem to remember that a couple of generations of family living in the same house being not unusual.
Yeah, I thought it was vaguely cultural. Plus, it's always to establish how dirt poor the characters are.
Right.
So I think it's cultural plus that.
Plus,
that
yeah. It's letting us know that they don't make much money.
Right.
It's narrative efficiency.
Narrative efficiency, which this movie is filled with, which is why I was like surprised that they don't stick the landing as well with this character.
Yeah, it left me... it left me not sure how I feel about the character, which is totally fine. It's totally a valid takeaway to have from a movie like this, because sometimes people are like that, because life isn't black and white. So very often you come away from something being like, I'm not sure how I feel about this guy. But it's like the movie, that ending really, like, to have both the characters, like his wife and his business partner, like almost one right after the other, come up and completely absolve him of the legitimate egregious wrong they'd brought to his attention in their previous scenes with him. So it was like, why even bring it up? Why even put it in the film?
So I
don't know. It left a weirdly bad taste in my mouth, where it was like, hey, it feels like you guys are really too worshipful of your subject.
I don't know if that's what really happened or what, but like it's so the pattern again. Like you look at the commitments and once they both are bittersweet, right? Where it's like the commitments, the band is like they're at each other's throats. There's jerks. Like the guy keeps sleeping with all the young women.
Yeah.
And that movie just sort of ends because the whole point is like, it's about this moment of time, the music, what this brought together. It's bigger than these people. The people are imperfect, right? And it doesn't feel the need to absolve them. Once is similar, where it's sort of like it ends, again, bittersweet, where it's like you don't get the thing you wanted. But this glorious moment, they made this album that's always, it's forever. It'll never go away. This is trying to do that too, but it just, by doubling that up, by being like I think they could have just. I'm really trying to navigate it now in my head.
It feels like they don't do enough to emphasize the importance of what it is he's doing, I feel.
Plus, like, it's hard because, all right, he loses the house. If his wife, again, ended by being, like, sobbing, then I'm like, well, I don't feel good about that.
Yeah, that's not a good way to end a movie.
If it was trying to be about the moment, it's almost like he would have been better as the villain of the story.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to, I don't think it does a good enough job establishing why he's heroic and why what he did is important. Like, we get a bit of it. Like, we see a little bit of it. Like, oh, this is a new generation. They're disenfranchised. This is giving them some sort of power and agency. It's making people feel good again. Like, I get, but I feel like the movie doesn't really hit it hard enough. So, like, at the end, like, the concert is supposed to be the emotional finale, right? That's the climax. That's the huge win, but it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I think the problem, one of the big problems is, like, unless you're me, like, these bands aren't particularly, like, well known, and so and so like
I said, I didn't know most of them.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because I do think it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't have to be well known if it's just celebrating the music and the moment of that and bringing these people together. But you're right in that it's like it really tries to wrap it up in a bow nicely while never showing. It kind of reminds me of the CBGB movie, where the guy who runs CBGB is like, yeah, he has a story to tell, but ultimately it's the bands that went through that place. Like, he didn't make or break those bands. Like, that movie is one of those movies that's kind of much like the movies we've been doing, where it's like, it's kind of boring unless you like the bands. And I like the bands, so it was fun watching people do covers of fucking Talking Heads and watching Rupert Grint play Cheetah Chrome and shit like that. Yeah, that was fun. But it's not a particularly, like, incredible story. And again, neither are the movies we've watched in this series. I think the other movies just did a better job at kind of facing that fact of being like, listen, this isn't a huge historical event. It doesn't change the world. But for one beautiful moment, these people got together. And it cost this one guy everything. But the problem, the little thing the thing that we can't, like, get over is it's like it cost him everything and also his wife and his friend everything. Yeah. And they didn't want that. So, like, it's messy. It's incredibly messy, and it ultimately, when the more I think about this, the more I'm like, maybe he shouldn't have been the main character then, or I think this movie shouldn't have tried to find that sort of closure that they're trying to find. Yeah, it's hard because he's depicted as just like this generally happy dumb guy, and you never feel like I didn't love this guy from the start. No. He's making dumb decisions. That's sort of the point.
He never comes off as completely likable either, to me anyway.
Yeah, I think maybe we needed maybe needed his internal monologue to be more like. Because his internal monologue is like, you feel like you're supposed to be on his side. Like, that's what it is. It's like, I don't mind a flawed protagonist. And the idea is he's just trying to get this one glorious moment for himself, and he gets it, and it costs everything, and you get to go out of it wondering, like, was it really worth it? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. For him. Yeah. For that guy specifically. But they didn't really do that either.
No, it seems like the movie is preoccupied with sort of almost covering up his flaws, even though they're very obvious, so it can't cover them up. But it still seems like it's trying to.
It weirdly seems like it's trying to. And so, like, it's really, like, I'm having trouble figuring out what to do about it, because it's a very odd movie. It's a very odd character.
Yeah, I think the decision to structure the story the way it is, maybe so it's engineered to have this concert be the end point, but it isn't really. We get a lot of text on the screen at the end.
I loved the text because it basically is like it
closed,
good vibration closes, then open, it closed, then reopen.
That was good. That was good.
That sums up this guy. And I think what it is it.
But they also had the statistics about the troubles, and then it goes into how many times the store's open and closed, and then it goes into a quote from Joe Strummer about the importance of that show. And then the credits roll. So we get a lot of text on screen giving us additional context to try to make us understand why this concert was such a big deal. But it's like, boy, I feel like you should have built that into the movie, maybe.
Yeah, I think...
I don't know. It's a weak ending. It just does... It kind of just...
It's a weak ending
weird.
because...
It's weird.
So... I guess it felt like they didn't fully commit to the messiness because that ending text was great because it shows like the messiness that it's like he never really got his life together.
No,
it's this constant fucking struggle. He never good vibrations never really did anything great. It just opened and closed and opened and closed and like they never got another big record deal.
Hit. Yeah,
and so like. That's fine, but they also were trying to make the moment. It's the vibes, like the vibes of the moment. They wanted it to feel very clean at the same time, and they couldn't really decide on the two. So, it's just I don't think it accomplished the same things that the last two movies of our little series accomplished. I suspect if you're not into punk, this movie doesn't have much to offer you. Because, I think it got a lot of extra points because I like the undertones a lot. And I like the soundtrack.
I don't know much about this period, and I don't know much about the history of the Troubles, so I'm always interested to learn more about cultural flashpoints and stuff that I don't know anything about. So the movie was interesting from that standpoint.
For sure. But, the Commitments, I had this problem where I didn't care about the music in that. So I was like...
They're playing old, because they were playing old, like Motown standards, too.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Which isn't bad music. It's just not my favorite.
Yeah, and if it was my favorite, I bet I'd love that movie because it's just watching people do those songs.
Yeah.
And so, anytime
we talked about that movie. It wasn't bad.
Yeah. Anytime they fucking cut to a band in this playing a song, I'm just like, I love it. This is great. And so, if I didn't have that, I think I would just be a lot more bored watching this. And I would feel that ending a lot more as being kind of bullshit. And it was bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just to revise what I said earlier. I guess it's harder to get behind a fictitious band playing cover songs as opposed to these are all supposed to be the real bands,
Yeah.
And then in Once, where they're like, it's a fictitious band, but they're writing actual music, like they're writing, original music. So it's
again, it's
the
about
original.
liking the
original music, I think, has to, and how much you enjoy it, obviously, has a lot to do.
Yeah,
with
I
it.
like the music in Once, and I like the music in this. And I just think music movies.
Yeah, I like the music in the Commitments
die by that.
too. Right. It's just that it was less engaging to me in terms of the story of the band because it's not their music; it's all covers.
Yes.
If that makes sense. Anyway.
And it's also, all right, it's a few things because it's like, all right, if I don't care about the music, the story needs to be spectacular. And the thing about the Commitments was the story is on purpose kind of mundane.
Very, yeah.
Because they're like, it's about the music.
Right.
Yeah, it's about the music. And I was like, well.
One show. That was it.
Yeah. And since it's about the music and I don't like the music, I'm like, well, I'm not, not into it. With punk, I'm a little more... Yeah, it's just simply more sympathetic, and that's a lot of punk movies. This is a weird comparison, but I think music movies are a lot like religious movies in that their first duty isn't to tell a story. They don't care as much about that. They're beholden to we want to show you this music, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to stop everything and we're going to play this song. Like the same way religious movies are like, we're not telling a story, we're trying to tell you a moral. And that tends to make the stories worse. And then if you don't like the thing they're offering, the music or I guess the morals, then you don't get fucking anything out of it. So I think that's just kind of how all these movies work regardless of what the music is. So... Like, again, that CBGB's movie, I believe, is pretty fucking nothing unless you like the music. And the same with this. Like, ultimately, I don't think there's that much of a story here, right?
Not really. It's it's pretty vague about the events too.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's an Irish film, so it's made for an audience that doesn't need to be brought up to speed on what happened.
There's a fuck ton of drama around the movie, around what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's it's like just a lot more vibes, I think. Like it reminded me a lot of when I went to London.
So it's about a movement.
Festivals.
It's about a movement, literally. So
yeah. And so it's kind of a you had to be there feeling of the whole thing.
It's you had to be there in the movie, in point of fact.
Right. It's kind of like when they do this shit for the 70s, it really pisses me off because I'm like, I don't care about this at all. When it's like, look at the hippie movement. I'm like, look at these dirtbags. I don't care. I don't care about your music or your movement. So it's like you really have to be committed to it. You have to meet the movie halfway more. And I don't think that's a fault of the movie. I think that's the point of the movie.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So like, I don't know. This had that to offer me, but yeah, I still I can't get over the arc of the main character.
It's baffling
because it's so focused on him.
Yeah,
from beginning to end.
Oh, it's not baffling. That's the wrong word. It's just
it kind of is. No, it's kind of baffling because narratively, it's very confusing because it wants you to. It calls attention to these things.
Yes,
and then it just sort of absolves them of it.
Yeah.
When the movie does it's the thing where when the movie needs that part where he's like big city man wearing his glasses, being an asshole, throwing things. It's not that his assholeness. His it doesn't ramp up, and then his big aha I learned my lesson doesn't happen really. He pulls down that magazine cover, and I was like, when he did that, I was like, I don't feel like the magazine cover is his problem. That's not his problem. Like his problem isn't really his ego. It's the fact that he won't take care of himself and others financially. It's his insistent money isn't everything, and it's like it is when you put your house on the line.
He's utterly impulsive.
Yes, and he's not thinking ahead. That's his problem.
Yeah,
that's what his arc needs to be. Is his ability to then say, "I'm going to actually make a good decision for my family." That's the arc they're setting up. And then they throw it out the window, which is a perfectly fine idea, but then they have to show consequences,
Yeah.
It has to almost be funnier in a way because they have to recognize we were setting up this guy's arc and then we threw it out the window on purpose. That's what they're doing, right? I'm
not sure. I'm genuinely not sure.
That's the problem.
It felt almost like, well, we can't not point this out, but we also don't want to explore it, so we'll point it out, but we'll immediately absolve him.
Yeah,
it felt almost like it was included out of obligation.
Right, they should have leaned into it, I guess.
Yeah, or maybe it was this makes him a more three-dimensional character, but it doesn't actually if you don't, anyway. A
good example is actually, weirdly enough, Slapshot. Very dated movie. But the point of Slapshot...
Dave, I just wanted to say real quick, it's not the first time you've brought up Slapshot, and I want to say that I feel like every time you bring up Slapshot, we're never talking about a hockey movie.
We're not. It's not really a hockey movie.
I know. It's just interesting.
That's the point. That's why Slapshot... Because Slapshot is about, for people who don't know, a hockey team that realizes that they get more butts in the seat by just being violent and not following the rules and just being terrible and just starting fights, right? And it builds up to this idea where you think the arc is going to be that they learn to actually play as a team and not be violent anymore. And they build up to that and then they throw it out the window. And they're like, nah, we're going to be violent still. And that's the joke, right? The joke of Slapshot is they don't learn that. But in order to do that, the characters...
Sorry, I'm just thinking of another sports where the joke of Bad News Bears is that they lose anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's throwing out your understanding of what an arc, even if your brain, or even if you don't realize that's what's happening, your brain knows that movies are structured a certain way. And it throws it out. But it makes up for it by giving the individual characters their own arcs within that.
Right.
You
yeah.
can,
No.
you can
Subverting
generally get
expectation is a good thing to do.
Yeah, you can generally and you can generally get away with it by giving people some sort of dots to connect in their brain to satisfy them. Where it's like, okay, they didn't do the big thing that you'd expect, but these characters still learned a lesson. You know, you still need that like endorphin satisfying, like, oh, this person got a thing they wanted.
Right.
This movie doesn't do that.
No.
It tries to do the thing where it throws it out at the last minute, but there's no like additional arcs for the characters. And so the character just plows through not learning it, and then they're like, and it's happy, right? And it's like, no, you didn't click that part of my brain that satisfies me. Where like,
yeah, you told me that he needed to learn a lesson, and then he didn't learn it.
Right. And if you had them throw it out at the end while he still learned some sort of lesson, or, you know, like they still did something to show that he learned a lesson, it would have worked. They just didn't quite do that. And so it does fall flat at the end for that reason. It has no arc. I think that's it. We've been dancing around it, but it has no character arc.
Yeah, I think we nailed it, Dave. I think we got there.
Jesus, it took us long enough. But I like the music. I like, you know, Stiff Little Fingers. I like fucking Buzzcocks. I saw one of their last shows.
Movie, yeah. Oh, you did? That's cool.
I think so. They played L.A. The lead singer died not too long after, which is sad. But you know, it happens. With
Time,
punk
man,
bands.
time.
It's honestly surprising when they last long with punk. But
Yeah.
I looked up this guy and I'm like, oh, he's still alive.
He is.
Right.
Yeah, he's in his 70s.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, if you like punk, this is this will sneak up on you. It's a fun little punk music.
Pretty,
if you like,
it's mostly cool. If you're into punk music, especially this era, or even if you're
like
not,
Game
even
of
if you're just like
Thrones
going to
and-
like shows. Yeah. If you're into Game of Thrones,
Game of Thrones, Edgar Wright actors. It's got a few of those.
Yep. If you're into Irish brogues,
Yeah.
There's a lot of
There's something
those.
for everybody. Yeah.
No.
All right, that's all I got. Mickey for Therapy 2023.
Thank you.
I hope you get it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm glad I watched this movie. I had fun watching it. And this was through our Patreon. Patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. GAMEFULLY. Unemployed. You go on there for $5 a month. You get access to exclusive podcasts like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder's Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, Spiel Boys.
Yeah.
And we watch movies every Friday night with our patrons, and we do custom podcasts like the one you are listening to. Check it out. Why don't you now? And enjoy your new year.
Enjoy the new year.
Yeah.
We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com. You can find a link to our Teespring store, where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. Check it out. Slap those 2024 peepers onto that.
Yeah. Anything you want to say? This is the last podcast before 2024
Just
that we're putting
last
out.
podcast, period. This is it. This is the last
This is
one.
it.
We all decided.
Last podcast ever made
Last
before
podcast ever.
Y2K is going to hit us finally.
At long last, man.
2024.
Just
That's
to hit
what
me right in the
Y2K,
face
yeah.
like the Independence Day laser.
Oh, God, yeah. Bring it on.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't Y2K sounds great.
It does.
Everything this computer shut off, I'd be like, thank fucking God.
Yeah,
I'll go
long
work at a
last.
library.
Jesus, yeah, I'll just go outside and lay down on the grass.
Yeah, I'll make a zine.
No, yeah, dude, we should make a zine.
We should all make a
Zine
zine.
2024, Dave.
Yeah, zines are back, baby.
You're joking. We're going to make a zine next year. It's going to happen.